When the sun set this last Tuesday, the living grandmothers of indigenous peoples throughout the Americas, gathering with their daughters and their granddaughters, danced as they do once every month beneath the fullness of Grandmother Moon. In October, she is known as the moon of the falling leaves. These women are themselves, historically, the keepers of the people's water, and they exalt Grandmother Moon as the weaver of the tides, from which life itself first emerged on Mother Earth. They honor her for all that she's given and seek her guidance, especially now, as they and all of us face such great uncertainty about the future. As all who follow such things are aware, there's a reckoning upon us. Two of the core prophecies that have been carried for generations in the stories and expectations of the people are looming now. Each of these prophecies seemingly on the cusp of being realized. One is a prophecy of redemption, the other of apocalypse. It's perhaps no surprise, given the way the world has been turning, that this reckoning should arrive as a struggle over water. Its value, its tainting, and in the historic stand of some 270 indigenous tribes and their allies in North Dakota right now, its protection. Now, as it happens, a Texas-sized oil company, a Texas-based oil company, owned by a Texas-based billionaire named Kelsey Warren, has recently mounted a Texas-sized project known as the Dakota Access Pipeline. The billionaire's plan is basically simple. He wants to make himself some more money. And he's going to do that by transporting 470,000 barrels a day of extremely toxic fracked petroleum product through a 1,200-mile-long pipe, a pipe that originates in North Dakota, goes down through 4 states, would end in Illinois. The pipe is slated to pass beneath many rivers, including the majestic Missouri, the source of water upon which literally millions of people, plants, and animals depend for their survival. The plan, as originally envisioned, was to pass the pipe's sludgy chemical stew beneath the great river just below the city of Bismarck, North Dakota's capital. There was a slight hitch, however, when the Bismarck City Council, mindful of the fact that the city of Bismarck itself would not exist were it not for the precious waters of the Missouri, and equally mindful of the global history of pipeline failures, said of the billionaire's plan in so many words, "Are you fucking kidding?" Now, among the oil industry's favorite go-to moves in their incessant assault on truth and accountability is to promote the fallacious idea that pipelines are safe, that their failure is a rarity. The truth is that since 2000, 420 pipelines have failed in the United States alone. The movers and shakers of Bismarck, though deeply beholden to the power and profits of big oil, are also deeply knowledgeable about the deadliness of the chemicals used in fracking. So they were having none of this proposed pipeline slithering beneath their city's crucial water intake valves on the Missouri. What to do then? Wondered the billionaire. Of course, we'll relocate and risk ruining the great river below the city. Maybe say a mile or so upstream of where the members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe live on their reservation, where per capita income hovers below $5,000, unemployment is pegged above 70%, and where people's lives have so long been devalued that we can perhaps reasonably expect them to swallow this new injustice as just another bad break. Perfect. The new plan will be, we'll put this pipe full of very valuable poison beneath the great river just above where the Indians live and drink from it. They're used to such things. The Standing Rock Sioux, however, in contrast to the billionaire and his banking partners, looked at the new plan and deemed it, dare I say, a bit misconceived. The Indians said in so many words, no. On April 1st, a handful of these Lakota set up a prayer camp at the place where the Cannonball River meets the Missouri, a place of historical treasure long held sacred by the tribe. This handful of protectors restated the crucial truth in their native tongue. Mni wichone, water is life. They vowed to resist, they called for help, and in the days since, from all over America and well beyond, thousands of people, mostly indigenous but many not, have answered that call. They've come to Standing Rock to stand beside the tribe and to stand up for life. At the time of the first signed treaty between the U.S. government and the tribe, whose members included the revered Lakota chief and holy man, Sitting Bull, the Great Sioux Nation roamed a territory that included much of North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Montana, and Wyoming as well. This vast nation, the 7 tribal clans of the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota people, encompassed an area fully 5% of the entire continental U.S. Its spiritual center lived in the Black Hills in what is now South Dakota. Now, in that first treaty signed at Fort Laramie in Wyoming in 1851, right in the middle of the century, the Sioux Nation granted safe passage through their territory to a stream of gold miners heading to California in search of riches. In exchange, the tribe was granted recognition of their sovereignty and annual federal payments of $50,000 to be paid for 50 consecutive years. Now, the government honored that 1951 treaty for all of a year, at which time the U.S. Senate reduced the duration of the promised payments from the agreed 50 years to 10. In 1862, gold was discovered in Montana, and the government began building the Bozeman Trail through Sioux territory, erecting forts along the way, both developments a further violation of the treaty. In 1866, after a band of Sioux attacked a supply train on the illegal trail in an attempt to retaliate, by Colonel William Fetterman, ended in the loss of every one of the 80 soldiers under his command. General William Sherman quietly called for the tribe's extermination, down to every man, woman, and child. A year later, 1867, the Great Sioux Red Chief, the Great Sioux Chief Red Cloud, the Great Sioux Chief Red Cloud stormed out of a mandated peace commission in which annual payments were once again offered to entice the people to remove themselves from their traditional homelands. Said Red Cloud as he departed, quote, "The Great Father sends us presents and wants us to sell him the road, but the white chief comes with soldiers to steal it before the Indian says yes or no. I will talk with you no more. I will go now, and I will fight you." And fight Red Cloud did, effectively and with a vengeance. He was, by all accounts, as fearless a warrior as he was brilliant a strategist. The next year, in '68, the government, now earnestly seeking peace, convened a second Fort Laramie Treaty and guaranteed that thereafter the tribe would have, quote, "absolute and undisclosed use of the Great Sioux Reservation, and that no persons shall ever be permitted to pass over, settle upon, or reside within the territory described without the consent of the Indians." There was a wonderful sense among the people that balance had finally been restored. But 6 years later, in the Black Hills, the very heart of the nation, gold again was discovered. Immediately, the government moved to buy the people's holy lands from them. They offered $5 million. The Sioux refused to even discuss it. As punishment, the entire nation, scattered throughout its territory in the dead of a harsh winter, was ordered to report to the nearest government agency to be counted. When the people didn't comply, they were declared hostile and began to be hunted by the U.S. Army. Thus, from 1876 through the next 14 years, genocide was finally joined. In these terrible years, Sitting Bull's opening triumph at Little Bighorn was avenged in the end by the massacre at Wounded Knee, where the people under a white flag and seeking the strength of their departed ancestors began to dance the dance of the ghosts. They sang to one another in words the surrounding soldiers did not understand. Quote, "The bullets will not go toward you," end quote. But instead, 300 men, women, and children were killed, slaughtered and starved now to the edge of extinction. 96% of their once magnificent homeland carved away, broken into isolated, often barren pieces. The people no longer had access to their sacred heart in the Black Hills. Their will to resist had died. More than a century later, the scene of the Wounded Knee Massacre in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, remains among the poorest and most distressed counties in all of America. And yet, despite the haunting remnants of the ruin they have suffered, the people have refused to disappear. Today, almost miraculously, they are rising once again to decide their greater destiny, mindful of the two competing prophecies that loom over the future like dueling spirits. In the first, it was foretold that Jujekashape, the black snake, would come to cross the people's path, and in that crossing would finally come the end of their world. In the Dakota Access Pipeline, attempting to pass its poison beneath their life-giving river, the Sioux have finally found their black snake. But it is this vision that has realized the other, that has galvanized former enemies to become allies like never before, as was prophesied by the great Lakota holy man, Black Elk. In the 7th generation, Black Elk said, the broken, scattered hoops of the broken, fractious people would be set aside in favor of a powerful new unity, and within this unity would lie the road to salvation. The 7th generation of descendants since the invaders first arrived is now ascending. And in the 270 tribes that have come together to resist the predation of the black snake, the people have found their unity. Can't tell you what a miraculous thing this seems to so many people right now. Black Elk's vision of this miracle had come in a dream at the age of 9. Quote, "And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the Spirit, and the shape of all things as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father, and I saw that it was holy." In 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court finally found that the government's uncompensated seizure of the Black Hills in contravention of its own treaties had been unconstitutional. The U.S. Court of Claims had previously said of the theft, quote, "A more ripe and rank case of dishonorable dealings will never in all probability be found in our history," end quote. The higher court agreed and ruled that the tribe was due compensation. Their holy lands and the gold that was removed from them were retroactively valued at $17.5 million, and 5% annual interest was also due. Today, the value of this settlement has risen to more than $1.3 billion and continues to grow. 23 nights from tonight, right around the time that many expect the U.S. Army to rule on the fate of the pipeline, The Lakota women will gather again beneath Grandmother Moon to express their gratitude and ask for guidance. November's moon is known as the moon of the freezing river. The United States will decide whether the billionaire's plan is simply business as usual, or whether that plan and the whole of the oil industry's corrupt stranglehold on American energy policy may finally be described and addressed as utterly and recklessly misbegotten. Grandmother Moon will no doubt look down with favor on her dancing children, mindful as surely she is that though the government has awarded the $1.3 billion as just compensation for the theft of the Black Hills and for the attempted annihilation of their lives, history, and culture, the people of the great Sioux Nation have never touched the money. For the Black Hills remain the Lakota's sacred heart, and as such, the Black Hills are not for sale. Thanks.